That's actually a
Yeah.
really nice segue into my number 3, and I'm gonna be giving another obvious one away before I transition to my top 2, which are a bit more on the old Hollywood side of things. So we may have some crossover there, JD, but my
Okay.
number 3 is Robert Downey Jr. And what I like about this comeback is that it is kind of similar to that artistic transition with Fred Astaire as you're talking about. But in a way, it sort of predates that as well. Robert Downey Jr. kind of had a double comeback in some ways. You
Yeah.
obviously have that first Iron Man, even to some extent, movies like Zodiac and Kiss Kiss Bang Bang that sort of
Yeah.
led into that.
Yeah.
Um, but in many ways, his persona and his suave exterior is what sort of gave birth to the modern superhero template. And it was amazing. He was so good at it. But then he started to become kind of typecast around that thing for so long. Even some of his starring roles outside of Marvel still kind of carried the Tony Stark isms that we associated with Robert Downey Jr. You watch movies like The Soloist or even Due Date, for instance. They're very much tapping into that formula that was working for him at the time. But then he goes on to do Oppenheimer. And it was very much proving a point that no, we've got a new side of him, and hopefully we still see that new side of him, given the fact that Doomsday is coming out soon. So maybe I might eat those words, but the fact
Yeah.
that Robert Downey Jr. kind of has a bit of a double comeback story, an artistic one and a literal one, I think makes it a very powerful one nonetheless. So I did want to at least highlight that before we get into some maybe older picks with our respective top 2s here.
Yeah.
But I do think Downey Jr. is certainly a more obviously cited one here for very good reason.
Yep. I have Robert Downey Jr. at number 2.
Oh,
He's very
okay.
much on my list as well.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. That's great to hear.
Yep. I love Robert Downey Jr. and it is hard to ignore this comeback story, right? I mean, obviously he is prominent in the early 90s, then has all of his legal and substance abuse issues, goes away, and the fact that he got in trouble for a lot of those things prior to the internet really speaks to how bad it was, because that was an era where you could get away with doing a lot of bad things. Like today,
That's a
with the
good point.
internet
That's a very
discourse,
good point.
with the internet discourse today, you can't even shoplift without the internet
That's
just killing you.
very,
Okay?
very good point, man.
It is a very different universe that we live in today, and the fact that he got in trouble and was blacklisted for whatever he did during that era, yeah, it really says something. So he comes back, and you're right that there are two phases here for sure, because he comes back with something like Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, has a little role in Good Night and Good Luck. Really great film. Love that one as well.
Very good.
Zodiac, as you mentioned, and maybe underratedly, I love A Scanner Darkly as well.
Oh, great movie. Yeah.
So throughout 2005, 6, and 7, he's actually doing some really fantastic work in these incredible artistic movies. Then, because he's proven himself on the small scale, he is given the opportunity of doing Iron Man and Tony Stark. And as we all know now, he is born to be Tony Stark. He was born to play that role, and it's become this iconic thing. But to your point, what's so exciting about Oppenheimer is that it gave us an opportunity to see that side of him again that we had barely seen since he joined the MCU. And I think that's why, for a lot of us, it was disappointing that he went back, because during his Oscar speech, he was essentially saying, I'm done.
I'm done
doing the Marvel
this
thing.
is the start of my new phase.
This is the start of a new phase for me. I want to do more things like this.
Yeah.
And then he just goes back to the MCU. So, I mean, maybe he'll be great as Doom. Maybe
I'm sure
that
he will. I'm
out.
sure
I
he
don't
will.
know.
And I think it'll be short-lived. This is perhaps just, an exit off of a highway, this newly found phase of a highway, and this is just a pit stop playing Doom. So he'll probably get back to the Oppenheimers of the world once Secret Wars is done. At least I hope so.
And to be fair to him, that probably was the plan, to do more Oppenheimers. And then Marvel called and he said, how much are you going to pay me? Yeah, sign me up.
Yeah, yeah. Can't say no to
Like
that.
I have no
Can't
one's
say
going to
no to
turn
that.
down that ludicrous amount of money. So that's probably how that played out, I would imagine.
Oh no, yeah,
At any
probably.
rate, it's an incredible comeback story, and he is now the king of Hollywood in many respects. So you can't deny it. It is just an
One one
undeniable comeback story.
one of the great movie stars. He really
Yeah,
is.
absolutely. In an era where there's few movie stars,
Yeah,
he is one of them.
he is.
He's
He
he's
absolutely
still
is.
one of the few we have left for sure.
Yeah. All right, so that
Okay,
was your number two.
that was my number
So
two.
do you want to go? You still have your number three left, right? You want to
Yep.
go right to that?
Yeah, I can go to my number three. This is also a modern comeback. It is Keanu Reeves. I've Keanu Reeves at number three here.
Okay.
And Keanu is one of those Nicolas Cage types where he's this big star in the 90s,
Mm-hmm.
but then you get to the 2000s and things cool off. After a while, he had some big misses. It's not as if he wasn't working. He was in some big movies even throughout the 2000s, but a
Mm-hmm.
lot of them did not hit. And so he wasn't the bankable lead that he was in the 90s, despite the cult love that a lot of us had for him. Then
Mm-hmm.
in 2014, that all changes. That all changes completely with John Wick, which, again, I think is ironic because John Wick wasn't meant to be this huge, massive Hollywood comeback movie.
No,
It
no.
was a low budget action
That was
movie.
kind of an accident. If anything, that first
Yes.
John Wick was kind of riding the high of a certain Hollywood epidemic, if you will, of
Yeah.
making movies where you put a famous older actor in an action movie, give him a gun, and make a revenge story out of it.
Yeah.
It's kind of
It's
another Taken or another Edge of Darkness.
exactly.
It's very much in that formula.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when Liam Neeson was doing Taken, I don't think that he had any clue that film would hit the way that it did.
Yeah,
And it's, some of Nicolas Cage's independent work. Some of them have blown up beyond anything he could have expected.
sure.
John Travolta has done this a lot in recent years. None of them have really blown up in a John Wick kind of way, but generally he's been doing a lot of those low budget action movies.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of old, like 90s, 80s,
Yeah,
90s
yeah,
action stars have had, they've run into this, right? Where in their
yeah.
older days, they just do these low budget movies. Some of them blow up, some of them don't. John Wick was a low budget action film. They probably had no clue that it would blow up the way that it did, but it did.
Right.
It exploded, absolutely exploded. So he was back in a huge, huge way, was able to reinvent himself as this iconic action star. He
Mm-hmm.
was that already, but certainly was able to reinvent himself in a new way with John Wick. And it allowed him, and like, I think it opened up doors. Like the new Matrix film that came out a few years ago, that doesn't really happen without John Wick. I
No,
mean,
it
maybe it
doesn't.
would because we live in a world today where it's all
Where
about sequels and remakes and reboots.
it
So
probably, yeah,
maybe,
it's
but I think that
I think
mostly
it, yeah,
crystallizes because of the new fame he found as a result of
it
Wick.
definitely got rushed along more quickly because they had something to tie it to, something to back it up.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I don't disagree with that. I think that movie is so underrated, Matrix Resurrections. I think it's
Yeah.
quite good.
And especially when you couple it with the Wachowski sisters, by that time, their value had more or less tanked, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So I think that Matrix movie really only happens because of the Wick revival.
yeah,
And
yeah.
obviously it went on to do pretty well. So Keanu Reeves, the way that he has relaunched himself in such a huge, huge way, like borderline Downey Jr. way, like this Wick franchise just will not die. Even though the character, spoiler alert, has been killed off,
Oh, they're
he's
still
still
making a
coming
new
back.
one. Yeah,
He's still coming back. They're making they're John Wick 5. I don't know how the character is
I
dead.
I don't know, man. I think director Chad Stahelski, I think his name is. I think he is listening to the fans for John Wick Chapter 5. There have been a lot of people either theorizing or wanting at least a John Wick bat out of hell like movie.
Maybe
And
that's what it'll be.
and Chad Stahelski has even said that Chapter 5 will be a very different and maybe even surprising story.
Yes, I
So,
did
yeah.
see those comments that it's going to maybe appropriately here, like reinvent the character
Mhm.
in some sort of way. And of course, speaking of Wick, speaking of Reeves as Wick, I
Mhm.
guess,
Yeah.
is going to be in Ballerina later this summer. So he is
Yeah.
that character, and
You
that
know,
character is everywhere now.
you talked about how Robert Downey Jr. was born to play Tony Stark, that he like spearheaded a franchise because of it. You don't have many opportunities, or you don't see many actors who get the opportunity to lead and spearhead two franchises that they were
Yeah,
born to play. Keanu Reeves is one of them. He has two. He has the
yeah,
Matrix
he
films
is the
and the John
chosen
Wick
one
films.
for
Yeah, he
sure,
he
and he's
absolutely
also
is.
the boogeyman.
Well, and then if and when we finally get a Speed 3, we could say he was also
The Speed Man.
yeah, born to play Jack.
Yeah, exactly. And I love that about Keanu Reeves. And that to me is another one of those. There are plenty of obvious modern picks for sure, but Downey Jr. and Reeves, because of the cultural impact and the zeitgeist and just how significant they've been, I think that's why they kind of stood above the rest. But
Yeah.
there's clearly plenty of examples. But those are my two modern picks that I really love.
I think those are great choices. All right, so I guess we can go on to my number 2. You already gave
You're
your
number
number
two.
2.
Yeah, I gave my
So
number two away.
my number 2, I wouldn't be surprised if this is your number 1, just given how much you like this particular movie where this particular comeback occurred. But for my number 2, I'm going to go with Marlon Brando for The Godfather.
Yeah, this is another great honorable mention for me. This was
Okay.
close to being on my list. Yeah.
Okay. And the thing with this is that I guess I'm putting less weight on the comeback story this time and more weight on, I guess, the sheer like just artistic representation here. That Marlon Brando for a while was, no pun intended, the Godfather of Hollywood. Just given the
Mhm.
roles that he was in, the movies that he was starring in, and just how talented that he was, whether it be
Yeah.
in A Streetcar Named Desire or On the Waterfront, whatever it might
Awesome
be.
movies. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing movies. Much of his output in the 60s, wouldn't say was bad, did not match the success of what he was known for, to the
Mhm.
point that he needed to prove something. And what does he do to prove that? He gives a performance that many people might say is one of the greatest performances of
Of
all
all
time.
time. Yeah.
Yeah, like that's how you shut people up.
Exactly. Oh, you don't think I can do this? Oh,
Yeah,
I got something. I got something for you.
yeah. So that's why I feel like we need to at least acknowledge Marlon Brando. It just goes to show how powerful The Godfather itself is. So that's why it's my number 2. And much of what he would then do in the 70s, showcase the newly found movie stardom and the mystery around that movie stardom. Like a movie like Apocalypse Now was sold because of Marlon Brando, and he has such a brief and strange performance in it. But his shadow oversees the whole movie. It's so haunting because of that mysterious presence that you're just waiting to see. But Marlon Brando had that mysterious presence that made you want to see what it was all about. And that's honestly the sign of a great comeback, making that happen. So, yeah, Marlon Brando, I think, is one we have to talk about.
Yeah. No, that is a great pick. It's one I very, very much considered here as well. And I don't know, maybe falls a little bit into that John Travolta camp for me.
Hmm.
Um, I love it though. I mean, I don't really have any other reasons to not pick it here. And I guess maybe if I was being like purely objective, it's probably in my 5 simply because that performance and how legendary it is. It's just undeniable. And he
Hmm.
went on to have a fascinating career in the
Oh, yeah.
aftermath
Yeah.
of that performance and the success of that as well,
I mean, yeah.
including being in Superman. Of course, there's Apocalypse Now, and that crazy little cameo he has there
I love it.
is incredible. So, yeah, but that's a big one. That's a big one. Top 10 for sure if we're expanding this out. No doubt about it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that was my number 2.
All
You
right.
already revealed your number 2
Yeah,
because we had
Downey
Robert
Jr.
Downey Jr. as
Yep.
a crossover there. So we're at our number 1s.
Number 1.
Should I
Right.
go ahead and take this one and then you'll go to yours?
Yep. Yep. Go ahead. What do you got?
That'd be fun if we have some crossover here. I didn't really expect to have this one all the way at number 1, but I think the historical ramifications of this comeback are ones that we need to also acknowledge, especially given the trajectory of Hollywood. My number 1 is Gloria Swanson for Sunset Boulevard.
The comeback that defines comebacks.
Yeah.
It is the number 1. Sometimes the best one is the most obvious one, but
this is the most obvious one. It really is.
This topic begins and ends with Gloria Swanson. 100%.
It absolutely does. So I'm glad we agree on this. Yeah. But a lot of it does come down to the circumstances of how difficult it was for many actors, directors to make the transition from silent films into the talkies. It was a really hard game for a lot of them, and many of them did struggle. In some cases, some of them struggled so hard they just refused to play the game, like Charlie Chaplin. And now his films are revered for that, just by refusing to compromise. But Gloria Swanson is someone that really did struggle in the 1930s and really sort of left the spotlight for what I guess was a full decade, if I'm not mistaken. And she makes this return in Billy Wilder's Sunset Boulevard. And it's not just the return itself that makes it such a great comeback and how good her performance is. I feel like this is one of the earliest examples of meta performance, or just meta interpretation of film in film. Like, we see that a lot with many movies nowadays. They go meta, or as Dewey says in Scream 4, how whata can you get? But in many ways, like, Sunset Boulevard was one of the very first examples of being so self-referential and self-aware. And her performance, Gloria Swanson's performance, is very much the epitome of that. In a way, she's kind of playing, I don't want to say a version of herself, but maybe a version of what she may have gone through. Yeah, kind of. Yeah. There is something very real about that. And again, we weren't alive in the 1950s to know for sure how many movies were very self-aware in doing this thing, but I can't imagine it was that often. So just the sheer audacity to be that self-aware, and how self-aware her performance is, the bravery of what she had to go through in making that transition is astounding. So I feel like that's why this conversation begins and ends with her.
100%. Absolutely. I think those meta components is why that performance is so deeply haunting and powerful. I'm sure it's not 100% verbatim, but there's absolutely a truth to her being this silent era star that faded when the talkies came into the picture, into the moving picture, if you will.
Yeah.
And how that film tells that story exactly. Of course, there was a lot for her to relate with. And it comes through absolutely glorious, if you will.
Gloria Swanson Lee. Yeah.
Yeah. It is so good. Yeah. I mean, it is the definition of the comeback.
Yeah.
It is absolutely incredible. Easily my number 1. There was no other choice for me when it comes to actor comebacks. And yeah, I mean, part of it is the poetry of how it mirrors her story and how meta it is. And to get that kind of performance out of her, incredible. Absolutely stunning. I love it. And I mean, and that was what, 20 years, 25 years removed from her most prominent work. I mean, she was away from Hollywood for a long time. I mean, she had been doing some stuff, not really a lot though.
There were a lot of flops in there though. I mean, a lot of critical flops, and that transition from the silent film era was very challenging for her.
Very, very challenging. I mean, she worked a lot up until about 1934, and then had, I think, one other film in there in the 40s, and then she gets Sunset Boulevard. Crazy.
I love it.
Astounding.
Love that story.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. So yeah, Gloria Swanson, easily my number 1 here as well.